The Lombards, which means long beards, were a people who, during the Great Migration, occupied northern Italy and established a state that lasted for about 200 years. Today we will examine how the Lombards came to Italy and what their kingdom was like, a kingdom that gave its name to the present-day province of Lombardy. The early history of the Lombards is not well documented. They were first mentioned at the end of the 1st century BCE in the works of the Greek historian Strabo. He described them as a nomadic Germanic people living in the lower reaches of the Elbe River. The Roman historian Tacitus also mentioned them in his book Germania. It is evident that their migration continued southeastward, as 150 years after their first mention, the Lombards were among the Germanic tribes that invaded the Roman Empire through the Danube during the Marco-Mannic War under Emperor Marcus Aurelius. The Germanic attacks were repelled, and the Lombards, along with the other tribes, were driven back beyond the Danube. However, the northern border of the Roman Empire remained a hotspot for conflict for the rest of the period leading up to the Great Migration of Peoples. When the Western Roman Empire fell, the Lombards, along with many other tribes, migrated southward, eventually settling in the former Roman province of Noricum by the late 5th century. Here, they soon engaged in a war with the Heruli tribe, which resulted in the first major military success of the Lombards. With this victory, the Lombards established themselves as a significant force, bringing them into the sphere of Byzantine interests. They advanced into Pannonia and became neighbors of Byzantium, but at the same time, their conflict with the kingdom of the Gepids began to emerge. The Gepids also claimed dominance in this region and had an alliance with Byzantium. However, the Gepids proved to be significantly less reliable allies, periodically supporting the Slavs, who conducted raids on Byzantium and at times even participating in these raids themselves. Therefore, for Constantinople, the conflict between the Lombards and the Gepids was advantageous, and in this struggle, the empire supported the Lombards. After a series of wars, they defeated the Gepids and destroyed their kingdom. The Lombards became foederati of Byzantium, meaning they entered imperial military service in exchange for monetary payments and land for settlement. As part of the Byzantine army, the Lombards participated in, for example, the Gothic War in Italy and the war against the Sassanid kingdom in Persia. The alliance with Byzantium had a significant impact on the Lombards both militarily and culturally. Their army adopted many elements of Byzantine military organization, and the surviving architectural heritage of the Lombards is a direct continuation of Byzantine art. In 568, after their victory over the Gepids, the Lombards undertook one final migration, this time to northern Italy. One of the reasons for this migration was the absence of serious opponents in the region. The recently concluded war between Byzantium and the Goths, which had lasted for 20 years, had severely weakened both sides. As a result, when the Lombards began their advance into northern Italy, they initially encountered no resistance. Another significant reason for the migration was their constant search for new lands and wealth. Since part of the Lombard army had participated in the Gothic War on the side of Byzantium, they were well aware of the balance of power in Italy and the still numerous riches of the region. The number of Lombards who invaded Italy is estimated at 100,000 to 150,000 people. Along with them were the Saxons and part of the Gepids, who joined the Lombards after their defeat. Initially, the Lombards advanced into the region on the border of present-day Slovenia in Italy, where they founded the Duchy of Friuli. They then continued moving westward. Verona surrendered to them first, followed by Milan. All these conquests required little effort from the Lombards. Only Pavia put up fierce resistance, forcing them to lay siege to the city for 3 years. During this time, they advanced further into the Apennine Peninsula, seizing most of it. However, they failed to capture the well-fortified Byzantine coastal territories, Rome and its surrounding area, as well as the Byzantine province of the Exarchate of Ravenna. The new territories were divided into duchies, fairly autonomous state formations. The dukes were appointed from among the king's relatives, and thus they wielded significant political influence. Officially, they were royal vassals, but they never missed an opportunity to fight for the throne when the chance arose. On one occasion, when it was impossible to determine the heir of a deceased king, the dukes even ruled the kingdom jointly for 10 years. In general, just 5 years after the invasion began, the Lombards had firmly and permanently established themselves in Italy, ushering in a turbulent and intrigue-filled era for the Lombard kingdom. Its capital became Pavia, which had been conquered with great difficulty. Given the geographical position of the new kingdom, its future foreign policy was quite obvious. Throughout their reign, the Lombard kings attempted to conquer the remaining parts of the Apennine Peninsula, a goal they achieved slowly but surely. The Byzantine emperors were constantly engaged in larger wars in the east, first with the Persians and later with the Arabs. This, of course, did not contribute to strengthening their power in Italy, which was essentially a frontier of the empire. By their invasion, the Lombards divided the Byzantine provinces into several isolated parts, further weakening them. In the 7th century, the Lombards gradually took control of the surrounding territories. They seized Liguria and Tuscany, advanced further south, and in the 8th century, after several unsuccessful attempts, they also subdued the Exarchate of Ravenna. At the same time, theoretically, the Lombards could have displaced the Byzantines much more quickly, but their own state had internal restraining factors. The Lombard kingdom was always characterized by fierce, desperate struggles for the throne. Here is just one example. King Aripert I had 3 children, sons Godepert and Bertari, as well as a daughter, Theodota. Before his death, Aripert divided power between his 2 sons. Naturally, the brothers started a war against each other. Godepert called upon the Duke of Benevento, Grimoald, for help. However, Grimoald decided that there was no need to assist Godepert when he could simply kill him and take the throne for himself. Godepert was killed, and his son Raginpert fled. After this, Grimoald expelled Bertari from the country and became the sole ruler. He then married Theodota, the sister of the very Godepert he had killed, and the exiled Bertari. From this marriage, Grimoald had a son, Garibold, who inherited the throne after his father's death. However, due to his young age, he was quickly overthrown by the returning Bertari. This time, Bertari ruled for 17 years, but in the end, he too was assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. His son Cunipert became king, followed by his grandson Liutpert, who was also overthrown. But by whom? None other than Raginpert, the same man who had fled the country 20 years earlier. The Lombards preferred to remain separate from the local population of Italy, which could still be called Romans. They lived in communities outside major cities. The blending of the 2 cultures happened slowly, but since the Lombards lagged behind the Romans in many aspects, they adopted a great deal from them. For example, although the Lombards had their own language, they did not have a writing system. As a result, all government decrees and laws had to be written in Latin. The legal edict of King Rothari that has survived to this day is a continuation of Roman law, which was used as a foundation to address issues not covered by Lombard customs. Another challenge was religion. At the time of their invasion of Italy, the Lombards were adherents of Arianism, a 4th century early Christian doctrine. This created an additional obstacle to assimilation with the Romans, since the Roman Church considered Arianism a heresy. However, an even more serious problem was their relationship with the Roman popes, who were destined to play a decisive role in the fate of the Lombard kingdom. While the Lombards were Arians, tensions in their relations with the popes continuously escalated. The popes sought to place a king loyal to them on the throne, while the Lombards aimed to help a pope friendly to them ascend the sacred seat. In the second half of the 7th century, with the support of Rome, Aripert I became the king of the Lombards. He was the first adherent of Orthodox Nicene Christianity on the Lombard throne. Gradually, the Roman Church supplanted Arianism among the Lombards. However, conflicts with the popes did not end there. Power among the Lombards changed frequently, and Rome could not rely on the stability of their foreign policy. The final straw was the conquest of the Exarchate of Ravenna, after which Rome remained the only significant territory in Italy not under Lombard rule. The popes became seriously concerned that they would be next. The Lombard king Aistulf did not conceal his hostility toward Rome. The Byzantines, who had already abandoned attempts to expel the Lombards, could no longer be counted on for support. As a result, Pope Stephen II turned to the Franks for help. The timing was highly favorable. The Franks were in the midst of a transition from the ruling Merovingian dynasty to the Carolingians. The father of Charlemagne, Pepin the Short, had overthrown the last Merovingian king, and it was crucial for him to secure the church's support to legitimize his rule. Stephen II blessed the new Frankish king but, in return, requested that he intervene in Rome's conflict with the Lombards. It was essentially an offer that could not be refused, so Pepin invaded Italy. At first, he proposed that Aistulf voluntarily leave the lands of Ravenna and transfer them to the Pope. Aistulf refused and was defeated. The Lombard king was forced to comply with all of Pepin's demands, but as soon as the Franks withdrew, he gathered his army once again and besieged Rome. Another invasion by the Franks followed, and the Lombards were once again forced to yield. Now, in addition to the previous demands, they also agreed to pay the Franks an annual tribute. The lands of the former exarchate of Ravenna passed to Rome and became the foundation of the separate papal states, which subsequently lasted for 1,000 years, up until the 19th century. After the death of Pepin the Short, a struggle for power began between his sons, Charlemagne and Carloman. In this conflict, the last king of the Lombards, Desiderius, supported Carloman, whose lands bordered the Lombard kingdom. Carloman himself sought this alliance. Charlemagne, on the other hand, supported Rome. However, the civil war among the Franks, which would have been highly beneficial for the Lombards, never began due to the unexpected death of Carloman in 771. Charlemagne immediately seized his brother's lands, while Carloman's wife and sons fled to Desiderius. The Lombard king invaded Roman territories and attempted to pressure Pope Adrian I into crowning Carloman's son as the new king of the Franks. In response, the Franks launched another invasion of Italy, leading to the final defeat of the Lombards. Charlemagne captured Pavia and took the title of King of the Lombards, stripping the kingdom of its sovereignty and turning the Lombards into his vassals.